Well, I actually got a letter back from Jeremy Clarkson when I moaned at him.
But nothing from these two?
These two, no.
We just let you loan your car to us.
That's it.
Well, welcome to the Evo podcast, the first of many, hopefully. If you like, subscribe, and tell everyone that there is such a thing as the Evo podcast, we will be here frequently. This week, I'm joined by John Barker, Richard Meaden, and of course, the one and only Harry Metcalfe. And we thought the first episode we should kick off by discussing the birth of an icon, a very significant icon, which of course is Evo, which without it, none of us would be sat around this table today. But before we do that, just sort of see how you all are, what you've been up to in the last week or so, what you've been driving. Post Belgium Grand Prix, when we were recording this, we had Goodwood a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, what have you been up to the last few weeks, John?
I have driven the Handschalter, which is the manual version of the Z4, which is in some ways quite an impressive car, quite an impressive Z4. And I've also driven another German car, which is the hybrid AMG GT, which has a very long name. I think it's SE Performance. That's probably why it doesn't have a badge on the back. So that if they added that to the car as well, it'd be even more heavy than it is. And that was phenomenal on the Autobahn, but then anything with 800 horsepower is going to be pretty tasty there. So yeah, so that has been my last couple of weeks.
I've just come back actually from France and I've done 2,000 miles in my new McLaren. So all I can talk about is McLarens. They're amazing and I've really enjoyed it. So that was good. And a boat. That was the only other thing I drove while I was out there. So,
dare I ask which one is more financially ruinous?
No, I think the McLaren so far is good. All I've done is put fuel in it, which I really like. But it was, yeah, I was trying to not use auto routes. And I went to Mount Ventoux, which was a car of the year. Went up there this time. Did cold as every coal, really. Vernon, I think is the one I went to. All sorts. Anyway, so there's a video obviously coming of it, but had an absolute hoot, and it was very hot.
I drove the Singer Classic Turbo quite recently, which was very cool. Exciting car, quite different to the original Classic, a bit more grown up. Lots more performance, obviously, because it's 500 horsepower, I think. Beautiful, as ever. And I can't afford one still. So that's quite depressing. And other car of note, a V8 Mini, which is like a completely one-off, based on BMW Mini, but with a BMW M3 V8 in the front, rear-wheel drive, built by David Power of Powerflex. So yeah, lovely thing, amazingly well built, looks pretty much standard apart from fat tyres and big exhaust on the outside, and beautifully done and a real hoot to drive. So yeah, Stu's staring at me because I actually need to sit down and write about it.
I was just thinking, is that the extent of the review? We just need another 1,500 words, if that's okay.
I think I'm going to come back to Evo and drive some of this cool stuff, actually. I quite like that.
Well, you have to buy your cars.
I do. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Always welcome, Harry, to come back and drive stuff. So we're talking about Evo, which launched as a car magazine. It's very different now, 25 years on, with what we do. But the three of you, what were the car magazines? What got you into car magazines? Obviously, Dickie, John, your careers have been based on it. Harry, you were, I imagine, a reader.
I was a consumer rather than anything. But we got to meet everyone. We all got together, I suppose. Performance Cars, where we all met, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you kept bothering us, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I kept, dear sir.
Why are there no Maseratis in performance cars?
No Maseratis. Why haven't you got the Saab Turbo was the other one? Why is there, you test all these Sierra Cosworth and never a Saab Turbo 900 T16? I was that annoying person.
Yeah, who later turned up in all the letters pages, I suppose.
Yeah.
Disgruntled of Leamington Spa or whatever it is.
Well, I actually got a letter back from Jeremy Clarkson when I moaned at him for not testing a Saab 900 T16. And he took the trouble of writing it. And Steve Cropley, got a letter from him. Yeah.
But nothing from these two?
These two, no.
We just let you loan your car to us.
That was it, yeah.
That was the blue 2.8 Ghibli, wasn't it?
It was. The very first thing I did with a performance car was actually, Was it that one?
It
It
was
was
that
the Lotus
car.
Elan. Was it when the Elise was launched?
I think that came later. I think it was the
think
Ghibli was the
Ghibli,
first
wasn't it?
thing.
Yeah.
Was it a group test?
No, single car
Single
test.
car. Mark Walton did the test. And I remember standing in the
We
field.
drove over the little grill that went over the towing eye hole because
Right.
and we had to order one from Meridian, which wasn't as straightforward.
So that was the
as
end of
it
the
should
profits.
be. Yeah, and then I think the Elan,
I think you're right, actually. It was that Maserati that kicked it all off.
and by then because we realised you were a farmer, so you had
Yeah.
seasonal work.
Yeah.
But yeah, you were flexible, weren't you, in your
Yeah.
time? So we
Yeah.
sort of invited you along to a few things. I think
Road
the
test.
Elan was the next thing with the Elise. That's when you kind of became an extended member of the family, really, didn't you? And then you got the Ghibli Cup.
I
one
did
year.
a car of the year with the blue Ghibli. That was
Yes.
that year. We had we had the
We had a Diablo S.
550, yeah.
And a Diablo SV.
SV.
I seem to remember.
Yeah.
Went
And
to
this one
Croft.
Elise, was that the red Elise as well? In that one, was that the supplement within performance car? We're getting really nerdy now.
It was a red Elise, and you made me drive up in a Fiat Coupe 20 valve. I think was on that test as well. So I don't know. Yeah, it was good fun times up in Yorkshire Moors. I didn't realise quite unless you've done it. November North York Moors in performance cars. A lot of standing around in freezing weather,
A lot of
but it looked
cleaning,
lovely.
A lot of car cleaning.
A lot of car cleaning
And
yeah.
throwing stones at road signs.
Yes.
Much of this still continues today, apart from the car cleaning where everyone disappears. What was your when you were growing up, Harry? What were the car magazines that you read? What did you consume that got you into cars? And
I don't like to discuss it in public, but I will tell you that I was into VW Beetles and beach buggies, so I only read magazines on those. I didn't know that anything else existed outside, really. So my early car mags were those. And then, I don't know how, I never really bought car mags, passionately early on. But then just noticed there was life beyond VW Beetles, and I didn't know much about it, and got into car mags. And I think it was that real period of fast lane that came along with that early performance cars. They were so exciting and added drama to it and made it even more exciting than perhaps the regular car magazines are out at the time. So I just wanted to be part of the club, and it got me infused. And that was the start of the rot. And it was a performance car magazine that had the new MX-5 on the cover next to a Lotus Elan. They did it in California. And I just fell in love with the Lotus Elan, and that was in late 80s. And that's when I bought a Lotus Elan.
And John, your background was engineering first before you moved into the dark side of the media and decided that you didn't like being paid for a living.
Yeah, that's right. I left school at 16, went to do my apprenticeship at JAG, but before that I was a paperboy for about 3 years. And I was the spare paperboy, which meant if anybody didn't turn up in the morning or the evening, I'd get to do their paper round. So that meant a lot of time standing around in a newsagent, surrounded by a lot of car
Can't imagine what you'd have been reading, John.
Well, I couldn't reach that height. Couldn't reach that height at the time, Dickie. And it was a few years before Max Power came along. So, that was where I started. I didn't actually buy that many car magazines for obvious reasons. So when I started at JAG, I was an apprentice, and then when I finished my apprenticeship, I was working in weight analysis and crash tests. One of the guys I worked with there wanted us to subscribe to both the weeklies, Autocar and Motor, just to keep abreast of what was going on in the business. So we did that, and one morning he'd got Motor magazine on his desk, and he turned around and he said, "Here, John, you'd be good at this." He was a broad, brummy, Chris Day. And it said, "So you want to be a road tester?" And it was an advert in the front of Motor. So I thought, yeah, I quite fancy that. That was my intro to getting into magazines. So I started at Motor probably in 87, I think it was, as a junior road tester, working with the likes of David Vivian, John Simister, all of these sort of top-class road testers, and learning my trade there.
Dickie, you were once you were not arsing around in quarries in metros,
Yeah.
You were more traditional, straight into car mags?
I think my first connection with them was through my dad, because he always read car magazines, so they'd always be lying around the house. So motor more than auto car actually, and car magazine and maybe motorsport. So quite a nice mix of things. I think the first magazines I remember buying my first copy of Car magazine. I think Car probably influenced me more than anything else, because I love the drive stories but I love I don't know, it just seemed to be, there was a bit of exoticism about it, I think, because they would always seem to be in Italy driving Lamborghinis or Ferraris and that kind of thing. But I like the giant tests as well. So that was my, and they had writers you kind of identified with, or you knew their names. It was sort of you felt like you were part of something, I think. So that was my initiation into magazines. And then I did the Guild of Motoring Writers William Lyons Award, which is quite a common route into motoring journalism, because it's a bit of a weird place to try and break into. So I think David Vivian, like many years ago, did the Lyons Award amongst many others. So I did that, and then I had a mini, sort of souped up mini at the time, so I did some work for a mini magazine in my spare time, because I did work in a quarry, as you mentioned, hooning around in pickup trucks and getting told off. And then, it took a few years to get a job, full-time job, and that was on a magazine called Car Week, which was the weekly version of Car, which was really super cool for me, because I got to meet and work with a number of the people that I had only known through the pages of Car magazine. So that was really exciting. Magazine was quite short-lived, but I learned an awful lot from that, launching it's a super large budget magazine when magazines were big beasts and they were all, big advertising budgets, and it was sort of the heyday of print, really.
My college, we had a day trip to EMAP in Farringdon the day Car Week was closed. And the girls at reception had made a little cross out, post-it note, and stuck it on the...
We were all in the pub next door, I suspect, at that point.
I was quite excited. Wow, going to the home of Car Week and Car, and it was all sort of doom and gloom because everyone had just been told they're losing their job.
I think it was, I don't know, something you forget is that there was so little car media around. Like, you get used to it now, and it's absolutely everywhere, like on your phone, books, TV, YouTube, wherever you go. And there's lots more events as well. We mentioned Festival of Speed earlier. So you just, the access to cars is so much easier than it used to be. But back then, you'd long for like every week to get your fix of just car content.
It was unbelievable. I couldn't agree more. That monthly mags coming out was a moment, wasn't it? You just looked forward. You had no idea. You didn't really know launch schedule because it hadn't been teased anyway. You just, until you picked that mag up, you didn't know what it had in.
And I think the industry was quite naive, wasn't it? So the magazines it was based on relationships with manufacturers and PR people and senior people within Ferrari or whatever. So they didn't have to play by the press office rules. They could just come over and drive this, which I think that's what I loved about Car. You definitely got a sense that they were inside the companies, and they sort of, I don't know, were part of the culture, which fast forwarding our conversation a little bit possibly, but that's, I think, what I kind of wanted Evo to have something of that.
It was amazing. No, well, anyway, we're not going to get to Evo, but that is absolutely key, I think, to make an exciting magazine, is having those core contacts. And that's what kept us hooked. That's what you became loyal to a certain magazine, because they seemed to give those stories. They had that access.
It's a bit different working for a car company and seeing your plans laid out in the pages of a magazine. They found out stuff that we didn't know. And we worked in the departments that were making developing the new cars. So it got up to a peak, didn't it? With scoop shots. With
absolutely.
Hans Lehmann becoming a snowman for a week to get shots of things tested.
Industry news was interesting because it wasn't fed to the media by the industry, was it? It was sort of wheedled out of people that, I don't know, they had contacts, and I don't know, that it seemed much more interesting then because there were more surprises.
Well, there were spy shots put on the cover of monthly magazines and weekly magazines, because that was you didn't know what was coming. There was no sort of schedule to follow, and it was quite naive and sort of in its infancy, wasn't it, of this global industry that it is now. was still quite regional to some extent, wasn't it? It was, what do we need to get into Autocar this week? Well, what are people buying? They're buying a new Cavalier. Well, here's a spy shot of a Cavalier. Whereas, with all
I think
due
at Car
respect,
Week, a lot of the news, that was proper news hound kind of brown envelopes in service station car parks to get some scoop information, or it was an exciting industry. I think not that it isn't now, but it's a lot more constrained and predictable. I think now everyone seems to get the same story at the same time, and
there's a lot more NDAs being signed and early access and
privileges withdrawn if you have a story that they don't want you to.
It's very different but then the landscape is much broader with print, with social, with digital, and trying to control everything. To John's point of when people within inside the company aren't aware of what's going on, but it's in the public domain, you've got a workforce to keep happy as well. So, and more investors, more stakeholders who don't like surprises. So, it has. That's, I think, the biggest change, isn't it? I remember even when we were doing that first issue of Evo, the news pages were, well, where do you find it from? We were new and established, but it was still a buzz of finding a news story and
it gave you what you knew was going to be the next issue. So it was those leads.
I think we've said this individually and collectively before, haven't we? But when we sort of came to do Evo by accident because of circumstance, really. I don't know if EMAP hadn't decided to close performance car. I'm not sure
it wouldn't have happened.
It wouldn't have happened because the status quo would remain the same. But I think once that decision had been made, I think we'd been between us talking about the frustrations we had with performance car and maybe motoring media generally. So we did. I don't think we'd ever really imagined prior to that moment launching our own car magazine. But once you've got that thought in your head and it's actually on a budget sheet, or you have access to some numbers which then someone like Harry can make sense of, and then has the balls to kind of say, well, what if we did do that? Suddenly you kind of look at magazines in a different way. I think I loved doing Evo, was amazing, and I never really had anything to match that moment. But it does immediately ruin your view of other magazines, and because you're always very critical of what other people are doing. Working on a magazine was something I always wanted to do, but I never appreciated that I'd actually lose the joy of reading magazines, because you never look at something the same way if you're in the same business. I don't think it's a funny trade-off, really.
Yeah, you sort of we step over the fence, don't you? So what used to be your kind of passion and indulgence is now a competitor that you've got to assess for competitive reasons. How did they get that story? Why are they doing this?
We're slightly jumping ahead, but I can remember when the new issue comes in, well, that was it at Evo's office. You all read magazine at that point. You just went quiet. So I always thought, well, that's a good sign. They are proper car magazine enthusiasts, everyone at Evo, because they just absorbed it. Even though they'd written half the magazine, you still wanted to see what was in the mag. Yeah. And talking about how quickly we launched, Evo that 98 was when we launched Evo, and it was in April. I was out in Italy deciding what I was going to do that year. It was buying a place in Italy. It was quite a big commitment. And you think I think that when you rang, John was sort of the trigger. He said, "Oh, we need a hand on a group test." Well, that issue.
This is it. This is the July 98 issue, the last issue of Performance Car.
Yeah.
We had kind of engineered that, Harry, because it was an overnight test.
It was an overnight test.
Maybe with some time with Harry, we can sit down and have a proper chat about it.
And I reckon that would have been late May, when we did that.
Yeah.
And it was, although we discussed what performance car should do to make it even better and things, there wasn't really thought we're actually going to launch a brand new magazine. But you just dropped in the conversation near the end, by the way, it's going to be last issue performance car. Like, we better talk about
you said, what we want to read from now on then.
Yeah. Well, it's a good time to launch a car magazine, was, it's what I thought when we put the phone down. Oh, God. Anyway, so that But it's just how fast it then happened from that moment on was very unusual.
Well, there was a 2-week period, wasn't there? So I pilfered some numbers. And then you went away and said you were going to have a think about it.
Yeah, get a calculator.
And then you'd come back to us in 2 weeks with a green light or a red light kind of thing, and that was it. Good to you. I mean, God knows what you were actually. You must have been going, oh no, what we're going to do.
It was one of the, I was just sort of crunching numbers, and then I remember you coming around to the house. Well, I think you both came, and then you said, look, we need to know. And it was that point I realised, oh, these guys are actually out of a job in like 2 weeks, in effect, wasn't it? And we have to move on this. And it was, although it was a proper voyage into the unknown, but I knew there was a gap there, and I knew everyone involved I'd met, we could make a really good car magazine. There was no thought that it wouldn't be good, but actually to trigger it was quite a bit of a brave pill moment, shall we say.
To push the button.
Yeah, to say, well, we're going to do this. Cause,
what first attracted us to the millionaire, Harry Metcalfe.
But the madness.
It was a massive commitment on your part, because you had bought the place in Italy as well, hadn't you?
And I rang them up and I said, I'm terribly sorry, I can't continue this because there's a business opportunity come up. And they told me, no, you can't do that in Italy. You have to purchase at the price that you quote for the property. And if you don't, then they can have the right to sell it somewhere else and you have to make up the difference. So I thought, that's not very good. So I ended up with a lovely place in Italy, and a car magazine. First thing we had to do was actually form a company to make a car magazine.
And before that, I had to go and talk Stu into leaving his job, Damien into leaving his job, Alan into leaving his job, Jackie into leaving her job. Yeah. So we were, it was a. I didn't really think about it at the time. It kind of. I know you were dealing with the grown-up financials of it, but actually it's like a massive. I've thought about this quite a lot. Subsequently, having tried to do other things and they haven't worked out. The timing of it, everything has to be right, doesn't it? The people, the timing, the opportunity, the execution of it, and if any one of those things isn't, it's not that they fall over and they're not there. It's if they're not quite right, it won't work. But I don't think we ever really had any doubts about what we were. It's funny because to produce.
It sounds big-headed, doesn't it? Oh, we never doubted it, but we didn't. Once we decided we were going to do it, once, like say, when we'd got the right person in, the publisher and the ad person. You were very keen on getting the right ad person, Harry, because you knew that was going to balance the books. We were just more committed on the creative side of it.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing you can't control is that if anyone buys it. But I think we were confident in what we were going to produce. We felt it would be something that people would want to read and want to buy. I think the speed. Harry's saying the speed with which we did it meant people barely had to take a breath between Performance Car closing and Evo starting, and everyone knew the back story to what had happened. So I think we were receiving letters at Performance Car, weren't we, before it had closed, saying why have they closed it, and support for whatever was going to happen.
But next. Was there any, probably more on Harry's part, sort of in the back of your mind, if someone as big as EMAP has decided this market doesn't exist?
Never thought.
No. From our point, but from our point of view, they left us alone for like the last 9 months of Performance Car, and we used that as the proving ground for ideas. Yeah. So we decided what was going to go on the cover. There was no interference from any of the high-ups. They just knew they were going to close it, and they just left it to its own devices.
I can't believe they left us with the last issue. It could have been a massive cock and balls or something on the cover, and they wouldn't have known until it was on the shelf.
It was just inside. There was a little cock and balls to them, wasn't there? But we just used it as a sort of a sounding board for ideas. So we did a lightweight issue.
We'd been pushed down in a direction that suited them to fit in with their other portfolio of titles, hadn't we? And Max Power you shouldn't forget, sort of take the piss out of Max Power, but it was an enormous, 250,000 copies a month, a ridiculous moment in time. Actually, you'd see stickers everywhere.
Well, it was a cult, wasn't it?
Cruises
It was a
everywhere,
movement.
modified cars everywhere. It was a huge thing, and therefore that seemed a bit. Car was the big shining sort of grown up.
Well, there was a period, wasn't there, where
and they tried to push us down as a sort of offshoot of Max and Revs, and which was never going to work, and never felt right with us, and never sat right with us or the readers. But that's why the last 8-9 months that we could do what we wanted kind of rekindled the support for the magazine, I think.
But also the thing, when you saw the numbers, it wasn't actually a failing magazine. It just wasn't as big as their portfolio of magazines they dealt with, and therefore fairly loyal readership. Could they get the growth? They couldn't see they could grow that into another Max Power. Car magazine was flagship, boost the numbers on that, more ad revenue, one magazine, that makes sense. So from my point of view, to launch into a space with proven sales on the newsstand, all you got to do is then model the magazine you're producing to the expected sales. So it wasn't as though we were launching a new magazine. No. There was a black hole about to appear, and the faster we could fill that black hole, the higher the percentage of readers would potentially buy it, because their favourite magazine just been taken away. So that was the simplicity of it.
There was a key point, as you wanted to launch it at the motor show time as well, when the interest was high in magazines and motoring.
Going into it was October, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes. So this closed. That would have been June, wouldn't it? So July issue on sale in June.
Yeah.
When we moved into a sweaty office in Stamford.
Yeah. It was.
Stamford, Lincolnshire, yeah. Gouache Way. It was me, you, Dickie and Damien, who was...
Yeah, so you'll notice there's 4 names there, and there was 3 desks, of which a designer you will never get out of their desk. So there was 2 desks for 3 of us.
Yeah, it was Damien, his creativity and a printer, and then the walls became plastered with potential covers. But we also had a meeting. There's some bits of paper on the table here. We also had a meeting. Was it in Harpenden or somewhere?
It was in Harpenden, because the working title at the time was Road Sport, as I remember, when you were in that sweaty office.
Yeah.
And I didn't like Road Sport.
So those were the other options.
Yeah.
Any of those take your fancy, Harry?
Just the one, really. Yeah. I can remember going through it. Yeah. That's Jack and Drive.
Well, it's quite funny.
Turismo.
There was Ramp is there, and that has subsequently appeared as a magazine.
I think BHP has, or is that a website?
Grip is Neil Carey's film production.
Gran Turismo, that's quite a nice one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think someone beat us to it actually on that one.
Yeah, probably did.
Yeah, lots of crossing out on performing cars. I didn't see that one. Yeah.
Road and Sport.
So we eventually settled on Evo, it worked in a number of ways in that it described, we wanted to make a better magazine than the average car magazine, and Evo is sort of the evolution. And it was 3 characters, which
I wanted really
keen
short. Yeah, I said it, and also when he's talking about Road Sport, I was saying at the time there was a mobile phone company called Orange. There was a magazine called Red. I said, you don't actually need car or something in the name. It's just got to be a logo. You've got to remember it's a logo and memorable. And my memory of Evo coming out was we'd done quite a lot of these names. You had a list before we went into that meeting, and then I can remember I had an autocar on the table, and I was looking at models coming next, just the little column, and there was a Maserati Quattroporte Evolution, and I remember saying, Evolution and Evo, but and it just got added to this name.
Yeah, and then
we had a
E30 Evo, wasn't it? Delta Integrale Evo, and then the more we thought about it, and obviously Mitsubishi Evo, which everyone thought, if I had £1 for every time I phoned up a press office or somebody or an advertiser saying Evo magazine, for years it would be, is that about Mitsubishis? No. And then we had to go through that whole spiel.
And of course the irony was that we made a a dummy issue, and we took it around all of the PR, major car makers' PR people, and got a great reception.
Yeah.
There was a whole week we spent bouncing from PR office to PR office. And the only manufacturer who bad-mouthed us was Mitsubishi. He said, don't deal with these people. And I think that probably...
And where are they now?
that probably stems from the Mitsubishi 3000 GT, which has been consistently
built up bad blood
taking the mick out of
Did
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most people did that.
A lot of all for half of the money, I seem to remember.
Yeah. But yeah, so we produced a dummy issue and we took it around the PRs, got a great response to that. You know, we were hitting the ground running, but there was such good feeling for the magazine.
Huge good feeling, yeah. Where it's going to be upmarket, we were selling at a higher cover price. My mantra, as I remember it from those days, was we had to produce a magazine that we had to be proud of. So if it all went down the pen, at least we say, well, we did the best job. Don't cut corners. We wanted the right paper. We want perfectly bound, perfect photography. Yeah.
Satin covers.
Yes.
Yeah, we did a bit of that.
Spot gloss.
Oh God. Yeah. Yes.
So that dummy issue came around pretty quick, didn't it? 'Cause we did that went to Wales in the summer, didn't we? To shoot that test.
Yes, the group test.
The group test, which was
It's a variety of cars, wasn't it?
Diablo
SV.
Elise S1, a Puma.
Yeah.
Well,
we wanted to try and
Integra type R?
Yeah, we wanted to try and get a cross section of.
There we go. I think I employed you from the 1st of July, the editorial people. So June was the that magazine, Performance Car, had come out. You just cleared off. You were then in the hot, sweaty office doing covers and things. I was visiting Banks, and Banks said, "Don't touch it with a barge pole."
How did you get the money, Harry?
Well, yeah, we'll go on to that in a minute. And July, I said, I employ the ed team to produce the dummy issue in July, and then in August, the ad team had to come in. They needed a dummy to work to.
Yeah.
And then September was creating the first issue, and October it had to come out. It was something like that. I can't remember. That's how it. Yeah, I think it was something like that. It was mad, and I was. Remember 4 weeks in May I was buying a house in Italy. July and August I was doing harvest, and it was crazy. And by August I realised I'm going to have to be a bit more involved, and I think I realised here.
I mean, you didn't trust us three?
Well, no. And I'd never burnt money so fast, and it was just extraordinary.
It was the shocker, wasn't it, of all the money goes out of the door, like before the launch, then for the first issue, then for the second issue, and you don't actually see any money back until the third issue, pretty much. I think that was the shocker,
that was it. And also, being an upstart, I had to pay for print and paper up front before the print would run. And in July, I remember just putting the computers in. Well, first you had to find an office, putting the computers in. Remember, my Ghibli Cup, I think I paid £38,000 for. The computers I bought were £45,000, just the computers.
I think that was our first test of our relationship, because we insisted on Apple Maps. You were like, but you should have.
They're expensive.
PCs are much cheaper. Yeah, they are, but we hate them and we don't know how they work.
We're simple people. Yeah. But then we had a split office. It was Dell downstairs and Apple Macs upstairs. God knows how he managed to wire it in.
Do you remember, halfway through this process, we got word that EMAP had tried to register the name.
I got that from my solicitor. So after we did the naming ceremony, and it's quite interesting in those GTO, GTR, it was, Evo got out top. I then went on holiday, and then I phoned a lawyer friend of me and said, we thought of a name. Should I do something? For Christ's sake, you've got to register it. So I then registered it. That was actually later. It was very close to publication that we discovered the publisher had also registered the same name. And that was a bit of a hairy moment.
How did you get around that one?
Didn't we have some dated stuff that showed that we'd been working on it sooner or something?
I had to pay the most ridiculous legal bill for this chap, counsel, to give me a decision on it fast. I had to get information to him. I had to talk to people, they had to I had to record it. They had to transcribe it. He looked at it, and it was like, do with the presses roll or not? And it was very hairy. And I went down to his offices, and all he wanted to talk about was his 9/11. And I'm thinking, this has cost me £1,200 an hour, and I'm listening. Rippy, yeah, it's great. Yeah, now can we get to? Oh, Harry, he said, Harry, don't worry. He says, what are the chances of the other publishing company coming out with a magazine on when you publish on Wednesday? Are they going to publish? I said, no, we know they're not working on it. There's nothing. They just register the name. Oh, that's fine then. So you can go ahead and publish, because you're going to be the only one on the
Publish and be damned.
Basically, publish and be damned. Be on the newsstand. They can then challenge you, and then you've got months to reply to their challenge, and then they reply to your challenge, and it wouldn't go to court for a year or two, by which time you've built up goodwill, so they can't do anything about it. Now, my 9/11, and off he went on his 9/11 again. So that was we could publish the first issue, but it was a bit hairy for a few days. We were so let off, I think, because it was a group from, journalists from Performance Car, and this farmer launched a car magazine. If you were in Haymarket or that sounds ridiculous. So therefore we weren't a challenger, really. So we were left free. If a big publishing house decides to launch a new car magazine, they all pile in and they do promotion and they try and kill it at birth. It's a very different atmosphere with Evo.
We had a budget for marketing though, didn't we, Harry?
Yeah.
I think it was £7,000.
It was something like that. It was nothing.
£7,000.
I said, if it's good enough, people will buy it. We did some flyers around Silverstone and got told off, didn't we, by putting those under windscreen
Under
wipers all around the car park.
But we also we got onto the big breakfast.
Oh God, yes.
The last week of Johnny Vaughan and Denise Van Houten.
It was.
You got you had your little badge, Harry.
On the wall. Yeah.
And we had a few cars out on the locks.
And
We went to Golden Square for Chris Evans' radio.
Oh yeah,
show.
you went down there.
We were so busy cleaning the cars. This bloke with a scarf and bag, because we got there at like sunrise, didn't we?
Well, it was early.
It was ridiculous.
It was
to
like
get
4
in there.
a.m, wasn't it?
This guy just walked past. Well, nice cars, lads. We're like, oh yeah, thanks. And it was it was him. By the time we realised it was him,
we got a copy in his hand, didn't we? Because Fructus shampoo launched the same day, and were doing the same thing, door stopping him, and he took a copy of Evo, and funny enough, not their shampoo.
Oh, it's
he used to invite the doorstepping, didn't he?
Yeah.
Intervene and
We had Luke brought a rocket. David bought his Skyline.
I know we were cleaning them furiously.
Yeah, when it was pitch black, no one could see. And then we went to the sports cafe at Haymarket that night, having been up since 3 a.m. Doorstepping celebrities.
Just before we talk about that, do you remember on Channel 4 when we were in Big Breakfast, the one thing we forgot to bring?
a copy of the
magazine. How we ended up on TV.
See, that's why Eman weren't worried.
We were so fussy about trying to get the cars there and the dragster was this
You were just
Aston
staring
Martin.
at Denise Van Houten. That's what you were doing.
I'd flown in from the M5 launch.
You'd done M5 launch. I said, we got a mag? No. I said, what are we going to do?
What did we do?
We didn't have a mag. We said Evo magazine. You plonkers.
Because Johnny Vaughan turned up. We were waiting on the lock while you were getting coffee and all the rest of it, and seeing how it all went together. And he just appeared in a massive wig, doing a Jeremy Clarkson impression. It was most off-putting.
Yeah,
we didn't have a mag there.
No,
Is this the best car you've ever driven? Well, it's quite good. Yeah, it's so lame.
Next time we'd get it right. We will forget the mag.
But so we launched it at the Sports Cafe, and as well as getting all the staff together, somebody would print it for lots of money. We had to find premises. Yeah, looked at St Neots, and we went to Milton Keynes. We found Tower Court, which then became Evo Towers.
And we were the first tenants in there, wasn't it? So it was brand new. That was
great,
and it had a car park and
private car park, no bother.
It was very cheap at low business rates. Compared to Milton Keynes, that was a big attraction.
And it was an attractive plot as well, wasn't it? We were upstairs, advertising were downstairs. I remember being on the phone to interviewing Gordon Murray one afternoon, and the whole downstairs erupted because the ad girls had sold them an advert. But yeah, so-
Santa Pod in the background,
yeah.
wasn't it? And the glue factory across the road.
There was, that made TVRs.
Scott Bard.
Yeah, Scott
Scott
Bard
Bard.
making the resins.
And when it was all being wired up, were my favourite memories of it when it was before we'd actually moved in, where they fitting all the IT and doing the computers and, the server, all that stuff. I was going home, came down the stairs, IT down there, he says, "Oh, do you want a website?"
Yeah, and we're like,
And I said,
do we?
What
What do we do with it?
I said, "What do you do with it?" He says, "Oh, you can put your address, people can look it up and see where you are and things like that." "Oh, right then. What do you want to call it?" And I said, "Well, call it Evo, I suppose, is what .co.uk, yeah. Oh, that's available." So we had a website. I now wish I should have done evo.com, but I was completely ignorant at the time. But that's how evo.co.uk came about, those good old days. Because you also got to remember, when we were launching this, some guys in a garage in California were setting up something called Google. Yeah.
Whatever happened to them?
Yeah, I know. It's the same directory, if you look at the graphs of how the businesses went.
Yeah, when we started to use Evo Towers as to make it sound grand.
Yeah.
But we put a bit of PR out there because we did the launch of the TT, and you bought an Audi Quattro to drive down to do the comparison. That was good PR just within the business, because it suggested that we were pretty well funded and we were very enthusiastic and we were going to do the best, whatever we needed to do the job right.
We were a different type of car magazine to the rest of them. We weren't for big publishing houses. It was purely run by enthusiasts.
Yeah, didn't have a HR department because I think Gus picked it up from Warrington in the afternoon, picked me up from the office on the way down, and then we drove straight down to Rome.
You drove out, I flew out, and then you flew back with Gus's passport.
Yeah.
Which we only discovered
when the
about 10 hours into the journey back, which was the Friday everyone in Italy goes on holiday for the summer. So it took us 10 hours, I think, to get from the launch in Umbria to the Mont Blanc tunnel. And then another 10 hours or whatever it is to get back. Part way back, the car caught fire. That was after Gus had blown his stack because he realised you'd got his passport. So
I'd also left his pumpy on the forecourt of a petrol station, so we couldn't clean the cars either. He wasn't happy with me.
No. Yeah, it's early days.
It was early days. I was young.
Wasn't it one of Gus's friends who came up with the strapline?
The thrill of driving. Well, I can remember having some dummy covers and not liking the design, but he had put a strapline on, but I'm not sure if that's...
It was Thrill of the Drive, I think.
Right.
And we
tweaked.
Reworked it a little bit.
Sub-edited in.
So how did we come up for the contents then for the first issue? Because initially we were going to put that group test that we did for the dummy issue, weren't we? That was going to set our stall out.
Yeah, which is a little bit like what Top Gear did when they launched. They had all the cars on sale in the UK. We were going to focus on the spread of drivers' cars.
Well, the opportunities came through when we did the PR roadshow, didn't they? Because we showed people the dummy issue, and then those people that were most supportive would say, "Well, when are you planning on launching?" And then we got some opportunities to go on launches, didn't we? Not maybe straight away, but that changed our view a little bit, didn't it? Because we wanted to put ourselves on the map. So putting the Maserati on the cover because we were on the launch with Autocar and Car, and that caused a bit of a ruffled some feathers, didn't it? And kind of established us quite quickly, I think.
Yeah, we were right at the start, and I actually had a Maserati 3.2 on order at the time as a Maserati Ghibli Cup owner. I said, "Oh, I have one," and
then you saw the review and
went on the launch, cancelled it.
That wasn't that, but I can remember being in the office and trying to get us on the launch because it was all decided who was going on the launch at the time we were, but somehow we got a seat on the launch. Somehow I ended up going out as well, which I don't, because there must have been three of us, how that all happened. But anyway.
Yeah, me and Gus, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it was, that was the issue. It was a right car, good strap line. And it was
I think
a good
Tim
one to launch
Watson,
with.
God rest his soul, Tim Watson quite liked the idea of putting everyone else's noses out of joint, didn't he? Which is why,
he was at Ferrari.
And I think he smoothed, helped us a little bit. I think with the Maserati intro.
And you knew Tim really well. I've got to know Hugo. Huguet, that's it.
Huguet, yeah.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, because it was Ferrari Maserati at the time.
It was.
Yeah, Yes.
So yeah, that's how the cover car.
We had a couple of good.
We got the Aston V600 Le Mans, didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, not Le Mans. It was just a V600.
wasn't it? The road test.
the first
22B.
TT and Quattro as the new car.
Was it 306 Rally in there as well?
It was packed.
It was packed.
Because that upset Autocar 306 Rally because they must have been waiting for it and then Peugeot came into it. Peugeot had on the back page? Back cover?
No, it's Alfa Romeo.
Oh, Peugeot had it for a long time, didn't they?
Yeah, Plymouth Prowler.
Well, we actually did that
That was dummy issue, wasn't it?
Dummy issue. It was next to Farringdon, wasn't it? Where
That
we
was
shot it.
quite a good story.
Anna McNish.
Bloody hell, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Going for a drive on the streets, yeah.
Yeah, the Maserati. And then I think the thing that, one of the stories that defined us, wasn't it, was what makes stories like this, what makes a great handling car, and the access that you guys had built up with the likes of Gordon and
Matt Becker,
Mike Cross, all those guys, Dirk
Schultzman.
Troisman. It just sort of took us away from that launch. The new car launches were important, weren't they? But it was the other content that always makes a magazine stand out from its competitors, and I think that's that sort of that analysis and sort of deep dive geekery which was missing, wasn't it? Which had been drummed out of Performance Car all those years ago, sort of moving it towards max power, and there was just that opportunity, wasn't it, to show that we're a serious.
I don't think we could do it now, though, could we? In the same way, because
No, you couldn't.
everything is geared towards. Harry, you've done a brilliant job of translating your own profile and your particular take on cars with your YouTube channel, but it's very much an individual based thing now, isn't it, rather than a collective shared view of cars and people. And I don't think you could do it in the same way because all the incumbent titles struggle, don't they, with presenting themselves as a group in a digital form.
It's so multifaceted then. Back then it was just one issue you had to put together, because we slightly struggled on the second issue because we put so much thought into the dummy, and then we've done the
I think that's
first
when
issue,
there is the
and then,
sort of
what
have we done? We've got to do this again now and again and again.
Second album syndrome.
Yeah. What are we going to put on the cover? Oh my! Because we knew. I think we had Car of the Year was the third issue. It was that one in the middle that was the tricky one.
Career of 4, wasn't it?
It ended up as Career of 4.
Nice little lift of a wheel.
Yeah, we did it. But yeah, it's so different now to then. But it's still a good issue.
And we were in charge of that. I know you're in charge of your own content but you have to follow. You're a bit of a slave to an algorithm, aren't you now, in terms of how you present it and visibility. The only people we were slaves to were the bloody distribution companies, from what I remember.
Yeah.
That was another wake up call, wasn't it, when you realise, so it isn't as straightforward as you might think to get your magazine on the shelf.
No. You can bump it up
how much you paid for
prominence.
promotions and things. But that first issue, we kept back some magazines, so we had magazines to give out and do things. But then the distribution company came and says, we're going to need those because we've got demand for this issue. And that's why it's quite a rare issue. Actually, I don't have very many. I don't think I kept any. I had 2 or 3. I've got the one with how many it sold. I want to say 27,000.
Yeah, you'd scribble it on the cover, wouldn't you? And it'd be on your box file.
Yeah. So it was, and you remember, Performance Car peak was 35, so we would come pretty close. And it hadn't. I think we printed about 100,000 at the time, so it wasn't massive. Today, a magazine, Apple, Haymarket would have printed 500,000. They would have absolutely plastered it everywhere. So this was a soft launch, as you might term it, and it was all right. I think the second one did 21 or 22, but the third one did more sales than Performance Car, the Car of the Year one. That was 35, 36.
I can remember every month I would wait for the issue to be printed, and then I'd cut one off, a copy. I'd go to the home base in Wellingborough, buy a glass clip frame, and put it on the wall in the office. So there was this one solitary cover in the corner, thinking, "Oh God, I hope we put another one." And then gradually the whole wall filled up, didn't it? And then it went around the stairwell, and then we put them up. But I always remember that for the first year, it was there was deadline night, which was a pretty epic effort, wasn't it? Always.
Still is.
Yeah. But I think it's what we miss now, isn't it? That everyone was in the office then.
That was the best thing.
And it was exhausting, but you really got a proper buzz from having done it and go home, know it was done, and then you'd look forward to receiving the
It was also a lot
copy.
from still doing it now. It's a completely different process. What we were doing back then, photography was film, so you had that anticipation. You got off the plane, photographer or one of us would go to Metro, clip test, wait for 2 hours for that, and then another 2 hours as they processed it, and then Harry would go and pick it up in the morning, bring it up to the office, pour over a light box, wouldn't you, and laid it out, mark it up, drive to the repro house with a printout proof and the pictures, wait for those chromelins to come back as individual pages, send them back and go, yeah, can we have the film? And then John and I would go and do the film. I think you and I drove to the printers for the first
down
issue,
to
didn't
Cornwall.
we?
Yeah.
So we left the repro house with the last files, drove them down to Cornwall, or the bike went ahead and we called it up in the morning.
I think you were much more connected to the process as a consequence, though, weren't you? Because they were physical, right from the actual images. Everything was physical.
Yeah.
Proofs, chromelins, everything was, and then you heft that enormous box full of chromelins and send them off to the printer.
And you didn't see it again until the boxes turned up at the office. Whereas now we're very fortunate. I go onto the Google Drive and see the issue that went to press on Friday night. Every single page is there in a lovely full colour PDF, and you can go back. You can just look at it every day until it turns up in the office. But yeah, it was a much more big. The team was. You needed every single person to sort of synchronise, didn't you, to make it work?
Yeah, you mentioned Gus. I mean, the photographers they weren't on staff back then, but by gum, they worked very hard to get special stuff.
Well, you and Gus, you found the Evo triangle, didn't you, basically?
We did.
You did
Yeah,
that
it's where I grew up. Yeah, it's where I used to go. But then we joined up some roads that I knew and Gus knew a particular road, and hey presto, Evo triangle. But I used to go up there, 14, 15-year-old on bikes, I didn't nick cars and go under 17, but that was nick bikes, and mopeds, and Anyway, so North Wales, I grew up, and the photography thing, I talked with Damon, we insisted that obviously 35mm is what cameras people use, but you had to have a large format camera, and Gus Gregory was addicted to his Hasselblad, and he says, if you pay for a motor drive, I think I can do bolt-ons and different shots using the Hasselblad. So that meant a large format, even crisper, beautiful photography, with beautiful lenses. And that was a style that became an Evo style almost. But I thought it tested the photographers if they would invest in a large format camera. It seems daft now, everything's digital, but back then a large format only took 12 photographs on a roll of film, so you had to make sure every single frame was worth taking.
It was a Polaroid as well.
Polaroid,
developing it under your armpit.
But
and wherever you went, you could tell where the shoots locations were.
Little film canisters and stuff.
Kicking around in the hedgerow, on the verge.
Roll-ups from you, standing around.
Yes.
But the build-up to the launch, and the launch was hugely exciting. There must have been moments, though, for you, Harry, particularly, of almost after the first issue went on, what have I done?
It was a bit weird because it was so without outside interference. Editorial team, it was just us, it was a gang. And because the banks said, no, you can't do that, I did manage to get finance to do it. So I could have sold a property, but it just would take too long. I'd already agreed, and I think this is out there now, so I can say it without getting told off, but I had two bank managers. I had a business bank manager for business stuff and an agricultural manager for farming stuff, and because I was existing farming business, I had a much better relationship with agricultural, but he would not deal with the magazine. But he had given me a loan. We had an agreed loan for a grain building, so I triggered said loan for the grain building that released $250,000 into the bank account, and that got spent on Evo. And that was why. So I didn't even have any interference from a bank saying, well, how's it all going? Because that was this loan for this grain building that hadn't actually been, a brick had been laid on it, but a magazine had been started. And it was getting nervous on issue 3 when, John often reminds me that when we went to Christmas, I wasn't a happy bunny.
The Christmas message.
Because I was on about...
won't have a job in the new year anyway.
No.
Very Christmas.
I was on about...
Patricia and I aren't giving each other Christmas presents this year.
On the 250,000 facility, I'd used up, I think it was 245,000, 247,000. So there was not a lot. We were beyond scraping the barrel. So how was I going to, if we didn't have good sales or some ad money come in, and I had to pay upfront again for print and paper for issue 4, I think, oh God, this is getting a bit tight now. Things are going to have to go. Sales figures came in for Car of the Year, really good issue. Some ad money came in from SEAT for a rally supplement, and then we never looked back. And then the loan went, I can't remember what it got to 205. Anyway, it was in a happy place, and we could just get on with the business of producing the car magazine. It came self-financing, and I remember Alan Patterson coming to me, he says, oh, Haymarket, come on, he says, whatever you do, don't let it close, Harry. I said, it's not, it's just tell them it's a good business. I'm loving it. I've never been involved in a more addictive business doing the car mag in those early years. You got, my passion was cars. Everyone in the office passion was cars. You got to hear, you had this relationship with these manufacturers. You knew what was going to happen next. This sort of secret squirrel, and said, well, if you can get that, if you get us access, we can put it on a cover. How addictive it all was. The photographers doing fantastic stuff, and every month you produce a wonderful car mag, and it was just this lovely club atmosphere that I just look back very fondly at those early times. Just think, wow, did we really do that?
I think some people say, do you look back and now realise it was the best of times?
Yeah.
No, we knew.
I think we knew it was good fun.
We were having a great time.
Yeah.
We were producing a really good magazine.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my alarm going off.
We've got to stop. We've got to do something.
No, I've praised you too much, Harry.
That's it. You've got an alarm. Said no, stop.
It's time to start taking the piss again now.
Yeah.
But yeah, we knew it was the best of times. It was great times for cars.
It was.
I mean, you were... The fit of everybody, the way everybody fitted together in the office, the creative process to come up with content was great. I mean, you nicked all the launches for Bentleys and Range Rovers and things.
Yeah.
You left us to deal with the cheap Japanese stuff, which was hugely popular at the time.
Yeah.
And it all just worked together really well.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the reader thought it did as well, so that was really good of them.
That's going to come through. That enthusiasm is going to come through, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you could tell yourself 25 years younger, what advice would you give yourself, the three of you embarking on this project?
I think it was just to recognise that digital revolution that was coming with websites and videos and things, and how to bring that in and realise that you weren't actually producing just a car magazine, you were creating a brand that you should venture out. The trouble I had once we sort of came successful is we were a solo magazine, so the other publishers could see, this premium car magazine is doing really well. We ought to launch into that space. So you cover that off by having a portfolio of magazines. And that was the decision. That's why we ended up doing a deal with Dennis, so we could take that away and hide under a bigger umbrella. But maybe going back, we should have launched an Octane type or something. I wanted to do a quarterly. What was our best ever issue then?
Oh, blimey.
First issue.
25 years. Is there an issue that stands out for you all individually? Something
I think the big tests have been
amazing.
Really amazing, like the test, which we were just flicking through that copy in your place in the Val d'Ort show with a couple of Ferraris, and it was fantastic. But also the stuff that we could get together. We did all the special. We did the 288 GTO. We did
those Ferraris,
Enzo. We all getting those 4 cars together.
All the 911s at that point.
All the 911s. Yeah, those are the issues that stand out. Because we didn't just get the cars together. I think we did really good stories as well.
Yeah.
So it was a visual treat. It was an amazing selection of cars, and it was a great read as well.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about Peter Tom would write them, and it was like a wonderful postcard from a trip you'd been on, reading his words. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I remember the Veron group test very fondly. I mean, worked on it for a while, and I think Jeffrey came down with me actually when we picked it up, because we had to. I've been pestering them to try and get access to a Veron and do more with it, and George Keller, who was the PR guy at Bugatti, and he just rang out the blue. He said, "Oh, Harry, we have a Bugatti Veyron at Le Mans, because we brought it there for the race, but we need it back in Molsheim. Could you help?" And I said, "Oh, our delivery charges are very reasonable. We can get it back to Molsheim for you." "Oh, that would be very kind of you. Do you mind?" I said, "Do you mind if I just bring some friends down who are interested in the car?" "Oh, that we like customers."
That was me and Vicky.
Yeah, so we like customers, and then we all got on the phone. We said, "Right, we're on." I had the Pagani's on at the time, and we got them all together, didn't we?
The magazine's always a reflection of the cars of the time, isn't it? And so for a period, we launched into quite a difficult period because we relied heavily on GTRs and Evos and imported cars, didn't we? Because there wasn't the abundance of OE high performance stuff that there is now. But shortly after we launched, everything just started to take off, didn't it? Within a year or two, you could buy an Aston Martin for less than 80 grand and Bentley for less than 80 grand, and Porsche started popping cars out left, right and centre, and there were loads of hot hatches and sports cars, and everywhere we looked there were cars we wanted to write about, weren't there? And the rise of the supercar, and it was across the board. We had everything to go at, didn't we? Whereas now I think it's aside from all the media issues and the cost of being visible in a very crowded media world, it's just do you have the abundance of cars to write about anymore? I don't know. Because we were very present looking, weren't we? We weren't constantly looking back at classic cars. No. It was always new stuff, month in, month out, pretty much.
The irony of the performance car closure was because the market was shrinking. They said there wasn't the market there. Well,
in that sense, it was true, but it didn't last very long, did it? And then we were there to benefit. But I think we were very fortunate timing wise, weren't we? In our own lives, as much as anything, we were all ready for it for various reasons, and the cars were there to enjoy. It's probably the best, absolute glory days, isn't it? Late 90s into noughties. If you look back, all of those cars are still really, they're the things we rely upon now for retrospectives.
I think the thing that hasn't changed though is the people, because when you do talk to people within the organisation, manufacturers,
the enthusiasm is still there.
It's all there, and they're just trying. It's almost like the Formula One boys. That Adrian Newey is trying to work around the rules. That's what they're trying to do at the moment. Is they realise the legislation is hurting them to the type of car they have to produce, but they are, restricted what they can do. But the enthusiasm is still there, and that's what keeps me interested in the industry at the sharp end, because I just want to see what these engineers can do, how they're going to get around it. And it's still as fascinating as ever, but I think the product has changed.
And it's not as relevant to as many people, is it? I think with Evo, we could find a price point of car that pretty much everyone could identify with something, and now because cars aren't simple anymore, are they? They're all quite expensive things to develop
and heavy.
I still admire companies. If Russell Bolden was still in the magazine, we would have a Duster, a Dacia, or something in there, because they're the purists still. They're keeping. We can still do simple cars, and I find that refreshing that they're still there. Unfortunately, a lot of the performance manufacturers have basically trying to do as much as they can, do specialist editions, and you just run out of special editions. They don't quite feel they're
special,
just,
don't they? Because everything's a special edition.
That's tricky, but they know their time is limited. So we'll pump another one out. But then Gordon Murray is refreshing, isn't it? Because he shows that there is another way you can do it, and I'm staggered how successful he's been.
There is that there does seem to be a swing towards, as you said, the engineers having to find a solution because the path they've been pushed down hasn't worked, isn't working. And there's a huge consumer base out there that wants something that isn't being forced on them at the moment. They want something engaging, fun, something they can be proud of as well. I think that's a big thing that a lot of people in OEMs forget, is that a car purchase for the enthusiast market, which is still sizable and considerable and shouldn't be ignored, they buy something that makes them feel proud and warm and fuzzy and something that they cherish, and you can't throw that away and ignore them.
I think also from the launch of Evo to where we are now, people actually did buy the cars in those early days. Now they're renting them. And therefore they're on a churn, and that changes how you use the car, because you're just going to replace it.
It's not a commitment in the same way, is it?
Not at all.
It's a bigger financial commitment that you're sort of signed up for, but for a shorter period of time, and you can just walk away.
Emotionally, I don't think it's the same.
No,
is it?
That's the key thing, and manufacturers who have spent generations building up brand loyalty are seem to be happy to throw that away, because you've got someone who would buy an M4 and then Mercedes will try and tempt them with an AMG, and if the finance works out, they give it a go because they know it's only for 2 or 3 years, and then they can whatever Audi then comes out with, but that brand loyalty is what all the cars we over the last certainly first 10, 15 years were building up to. You were a Mitsubishi Evo, or you were an Impreza driver, weren't you? You were a 911 or a TVR customer.
I think it's difficult. Feels, I mean, maybe it's just me being old and cynical, but I try and remain true to what the magazine set out to be, and it's harder to find those qualities in the cars that we drive now, isn't it? Because if we hadn't driven anything before the stuff we're driving now, you'd be more impressed by it. But there's a better way to do this, and it's more fun to drive and more efficient and more exciting and more modest, and all the great things they're still there in some form or other in the cars, but it's hard not to be honest about stuff sometimes, isn't it? So it's harder. It's much more unusual to come back from a launch and be truly impressed, deeply impressed by a car, isn't it? You can be superficially in admiration of a certain attribute of it, but as a whole, it doesn't seem to come together like the cars used to do.
But then you're fairly buzzing from doing that Singer turbo.
Yeah, I think and the resto mod stuff and the one-off, I think they can make cars that are much truer to that, because they're not subject to the same rules and regs, which I think is why, I know we always bang on about Porsches, don't we? But when you look at what Porsche do with, I'm yet to drive the new hybrid 911, but I suspect that of its ilk, it's still very true to the Porsches we've always raved about compared to some of the other stuff. So some things don't change, do they? I guess, although we're looking at Lotus there, quite a lot has changed with Lotus.
That was the dummy issue. We didn't actually publish that.
That was a great looking car though. But I'm going to be very interested looking at Porsche, because their sales, are down at the moment, and they're about to launch an electric Cayman and Boxster. And
we were talking about
that. I think things are changing dramatic at the moment. There is flip moment happening an awful lot of car manufacturers, because things haven't actually happened as fast as they have. What I find with friends, they've tried electric. Electric does suit certain situations. I think it's a bit like diesel, that it just is not a panic for everything, but it is really good at certain things, and long distance, and diesel I'm talking about changed us. We actually cars grew. We had a more useful car because diesel made it economical to run, and we all ended up in SUVs. That's, I think, to me, is why that happened. But the sports cars didn't actually change, and I can see the same sort of thing happening with electric. I do not think electric is a solution for sports cars, because it adds weight. Although I remember the first electric car I ever drove, Tesla Roadster, and I couldn't believe it. Actually, it was so different to anything else I'd ever driven. It had performance, and we
did it as a twin test within a lease.
Did you?
Yeah, in the magazine.
You did? Yeah. it was just, it wasn't the new season, but as an alternative, I found it fascinating. Have you driven the
even
MG?
then, though, the signs were there, weren't they? It felt quite heavy, and it didn't work quite as well.
This has been, no.
And its performance advantage was snap open throttle.
Yeah, and then it faded
to 100,
yeah.
or, and then it.
If you wanted to keep up in the regular release, you had to be at 5,000 RPM ready for the kick,
right?
Which is not the way you drive.
No, and I remember that we had those testers we were trying to do when we used to do the lap time. Never got round a lap, did it? It overheated every time you went. So that's it. Yeah, couldn't do it.
And they still do that today. Had a Model 3 Performance, the new one.
Yeah.
Did a lap and a half at Bedford.
And
then the brakes had enough braces. Because it's got the performance, but nothing else around it is up to the performance of the acceleration and the straight line stuff. So
it took us an hour, but we've managed to start beating hitting EVs with a stick.
Yeah. I still like the silence and what they offer, but I just don't. I think the rust to it has been overdone, and friends who have done it have actually come back and gone into hybrids. I think, unfortunately, the industry pushed it into them too early, and it's put people off. So they're going to have to be really good. We adopt new technology when it's even better. It makes our lives better, and I think that moment will come. But I think we've got a few years off.
Well, it's probably a good time to bring it to end before we start beating EVs for another hour. So thank you, Dickie, Harry, John. Thank you for everyone for listening. Yes, please like, subscribe, tell people that we're here, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.